Thank you for joining us at our March action meeting, rescheduled from March 24th. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll get started. Just a reminder to the board members and administration to keep your phones on mute, please. And I'll turn it over to Mrs. Sugars for roll call.
Mrs. Arroyo?
Here.
Ms. Friedel?
Here.
Mr. Goodwin?
Here.
Mrs. Matlack?
Here.
Mrs. Neary?
Here.
Mr. Ovadia?
Here.
Mrs. Schultz?
Here.
Mrs. Tong?
Here.
Mrs. Seidel?
Here. Okay, public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the board secretary in the following manner. A, posting written notice on the official school bulletin board at the administration building on March 25th, 2020. Transmitted notice to the Courier Post and Philadelphia Inquirer on March 25th, 2020. And transmitted notice to the clerk of Cherry Hill Township on March 25th, 2020. First item is approval of our minutes. I'd like to make a motion to approve our minutes, the special meeting minutes board retreat dated February 4th, 2020, and approval of minutes of our BWS special action meeting and executive session minutes dated February 11th, 2020, and regular action meeting minutes and executive session minutes dated February 25th, 2020. Lori, can I have a second?
Yes, second.
Thank you. Any questions? Ben?
No.
Lori?
No.
Carol?
No questions.
Rosie?
No questions.
Sally?
No questions.
Kim?
No questions.
Eric?
No questions.
And Ruth?
No questions.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, I've opened the online voting, board members. I'm going to take your votes now. Mr. Ovadia?
Oh yes, I voted on my screen.
You did. Did you vote yes?
Yes.
Fill that in. It's not. Okay. Very good. We're going to close the online voting. It should show on the screen. We have all yes votes with one abstention, Mrs. Tong. Okay.
Thank you. We don't have any board recognition or presentations for this evening. Do we have any correspondence? Mr. Ovadia?
No.
Mrs. Matlack?
No.
Mrs. Arroyo? Ms. Friedel?
No.
Ms. Tong?
Nope.
Ms. Schultz?
Nope.
Mr. Goodwin?
None for me.
And Mrs. Neary?
No.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any of our student representatives on the phone? Not this evening. Okay,
No.
So we will jump right into our first public comment. Mrs. Sugars will read the comments that she has received for items on the action agenda, And for anybody that's out there watching, you do have an opportunity to submit your questions to Mrs. Sugars through the end of the second public comment period via email. And do you want to just read your email really quick?
We currently don't have any comments that are agenda item
Okay.
comments, so
Okay.
I will save them for the end.
Okay. Okay, terrific. Okay, so in case you didn't hear that, there were no public comments for agenda items at this time. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malash for superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So this is an unusual situation, certainly that we are all in. This is the first time that as a Board of Education and administrative team, we've convened a full board meeting in this manner. And again, I appreciate the board's patience and the community's patience getting us to where we are tonight. We tried last Tuesday, had some challenges, and I appreciate you all coming back so that we can do it this evening. We're in the third week of schools being closed in response to the coronavirus, COVID-19. When we made the determination that Friday night on March the 13th, the determination really was about what we felt was best for the children, what was best for our community, and what was best for our staff. And ultimately made the call on Friday evening, and then started to put all of this into place. I'm incredibly grateful for the work of our staff members, our certificated staff members, our support staff members, the folks in buildings and grounds, the custodians, the cleaners, the secretaries, so many people who have been involved, in helping us to prepare for what we believed was going to be an imminent closure, and then once we were closed, to get everything off the ground. The folks in our technology department did an incredible amount of work to prepare, to organize, and then to distribute, at this point, nearly 2,000 Chromebooks out into the community. It was done on 2 different days. The first day, we distributed about 800, and the second day, we distributed almost 1,000, to go through. So it was an incredible undertaking done just in a few hours, but took an amazing amount of organization. We are still in the process. Some folks have continued to ask us or have reached out because they had a device at home that's no longer working. They were not able to tell us that they needed a device. If people still have that question, if people still have an issue, we want to make sure that we're supporting them to get connected. They can contact their building principal and let the building principal know, that they still need a device, and we will help to support them and work through that. We're also in the third week of distributing meals to students who qualify for free and reduced meals. This has taken place in a pretty consistent format. This week, we actually expanded the number of places where we're distributing meals. We are now distributing at High School East and High School West. We're distributing over at Barlow Park from 10 to 10:45 a.m. and then at Carusi Middle School from 11 to 11:45, and at Barton Elementary School from 10 to 12 as well. We did have an increase yesterday when we distributed the meals, and we are doing 2. On Monday, we did 2 meals, 2 breakfasts, 2 lunches, and we'll distribute again tomorrow on Wednesday and do 3 breakfasts and 3 lunches. And we had an increase yesterday. We had done direct email to all of the families that qualify for free reduced lunch. And then we also did a robocall, a phone call. One of our high school teachers, Senora Rima Smith, who again, many of you know from her involvement with Latinos at West and the Spanish for Heritage Speakers class that she teaches, she recorded the voicemail for us, or the voice call for us, and did it in English and in Spanish. And we sent that out. So we hope that helped to improve the numbers. She was doing an updated call yesterday afternoon as well to go out to the families. This experience of distance learning, people have used all kinds of terms: distance learning, remote learning opportunities, electronic teaching. I don't know that we really narrowed down specifically what we want to call it, but it continues to evolve. I can't say enough positive about the teachers and the work that they have done throughout the course of the last 3 weeks to prepare for this, and then fully to implement what's going on. In the first couple of weeks, we did a lot of review of skill building, and kind of supporting the work that had gone on in the classrooms. We entered this third week, emails went out, information went out to all of our families about the introduction of new material and updated material to go through. And this is a learning experience for everyone, but I'm incredibly grateful to the families for what they've done at home. Because again, children, regardless of their age, whether they're kindergartners or seniors in high school, need support from the people with whom they are living as this experience is taking place. if folks have questions, if folks have challenges, if folks need something, please reach out to us. Cherry Hill is an incredible community that offers a lot of support, and we want to make sure that we are continuing to do that. We've heard from some community groups, that have food. If there are families that, again, have challenges, they can certainly let us know, and we can put them in contact with some of the outside organizations as well. We will continue to work through this. We continue to list that our schools are closed indefinitely. The governor said in an address last week that he wouldn't start talking about schools reopening until April 17th. The president has talked about schools being, about everything being shut down through April 29th. And we are at the will of our governmental leaders. We continue to receive information from them on a daily basis. As soon as we know something, we will let folks know. And I just want to, again, encourage everybody to continue to practice, this compassionate spacing. And I know that we talk about social distancing, and it seems like such a harsh term. I have a friend who has been using the term compassionate spacing. I think that just sounds so much better because it really is what we are doing and why we are doing it. But that it ties in with our notion of being kind and being gentle and taking care of one another. And one of the things when it comes to challenge is that our community certainly has risen up and has stood forward to take care of each other, and especially those who are most in need, which often is our children. So thank you for the work that the board has done to continue to support our efforts. Again, if there are folks in the community that need more and that need supports, please let us know. Make sure you thank your teachers. Make sure you thank your teachers for what they're doing.
So great. Thank you, Dr. Malash. Next, we'll move into our action agenda, but first, just one more reminder for public comment. We'll be accepting emails through the end of this public comment period, and you may email your comments to Mrs. Sugars at lsugars, that's LSHUGARS @chclc.org. Thank you. Okay, the superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2019-2020 school year. Number 2, approval of summer music program for 2020. Number 3, approval for out-of-district student placements for the 2019-2020 school year. And number 4, resolution approving a professional services agreement between the Cherry Hill Board of Education and Effective School Solutions to provide mental health services. Do I have a second, Mrs. Matlack?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Now I'll put it out there for any questions or comments. Mrs. Schultz?
I have none.
Mr. Goodwin?
None.
Ms. Friedel?
Yes, I do have a question regarding 12.4, the resolution of the service agreement between the Board of Education and Effective School Solutions. I don't recall discussing this item at CNI.
Dr. Mahan or Dr. Smith? Or Mrs. Wethington?
Ms. Friedel, we did not discuss that at CNI. It's a renewal of a contract that we currently have with Effective School Solutions. Renewing the contract early provides us the extended school year program at no cost.
Okay, but I don't feel like I can vote on this because I don't know anything about what's in the contract. So I'm going to be voting no on this item, just so you know.
We can provide some additional background. So the Effective School Solutions is who provides the wraparound services to us. We have programs at the Alternative High School, at High School East, High School West, Rosa Middle School, and Bret Hart Elementary School. And Mrs. Wethington could probably go through the specific years, but I believe this is the 9th year or the 10th year of the program. Mrs. Wethington, do you remember the exact year that we started with?
Dr. Malash, I think it's 10 years, might be 11.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and are we seeing positive results? What's the data showing on the implementation of this contract going on 10 years?
We see tremendous positive results. We've been able to keep many children in district who may otherwise have required an out-of-district placement. The services that are provided, especially from Effective School Solutions, because it is a wraparound program, involves one-to-one counseling with a licensed clinical social worker, for students. It also involves family support. There's follow-up and continuation of the program during the course of the summer, where there's contact between the therapists and the family members. This has been a tremendous benefit to children and families in Cherry Hill. When it originally started, it began with one therapist at East and one therapist at West. And then thankfully we were able to expand it, again, to the alternative high school, to one of the middle schools, and to one of the elementary schools. But it allows us, to meet the needs of a specific population of children who are with us, and provide the supports that are new to schools that typically are not offered in many other places. We are an outlier as a school district because of the level of support that we provide, and because we offer it at the elementary, the middle, and the high school level. Often if you were to see something similar, you would find it at a high school level, but wouldn't typically find it in the middle school or an elementary level as well.
Thank you for that, but going forward, I would expect that this kind of thing would be discussed at the committee level. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Friedel. Mrs. Tong?
I'm here.
Any
I have
questions?
no questions.
Okay.
Nope.
Mr. Royo?
I wasn't present at the CNI meeting. Do I have to abstain from these?
You do not have to. If you feel comfortable with what you've reviewed and what you've heard, you do not have to.
Okay.
Mrs. Matlack?
No questions.
Mrs. Neary?
No, no questions.
Mr. Avadia?
No questions.
Okay, with that, I will turn it over, and I don't have any questions either. I will turn it over to Mrs. Sugars for online voting.
Okay, I've opened the online voting, and I'm going to give that a minute, and then I will ask for any abstentions. Okay, Mrs. Arroyo, is there anything that you need to abstain from?
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
Sorry, had to unmute. No, I voted.
Okay, Mr. Goodwin? Anything that you need to abstain from?
No. Thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
No abstentions, thank you.
Mrs. Neary?
No, none for me, thank you.
Mr. Avadia?
No abstentions.
Mrs. Schultz?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Tong?
All good. I
Mrs.
voted.
Slater?
No abstentions, thank you.
Thank you. Unanimous vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll move into business and facilities. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approve payment of bills between board meetings. Number 2, designation of superintendent. Number 3, financial reports. Number 4, resolution for the award of bids. Number 5, approval of the Cherry Hill Campus Police Department standing orders. Number 6, acceptance of donations. Ms. Schultz, do I have a second?
Yes.
Okay, now I will turn it over for questions and comments. Mrs. Tong?
I don't have any.
Okay, Mrs. Neary?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Regarding items 1 and 2, since the board, and I guess it's more of a comment to open for discussion, since we are able to meet, I'm not sure we need to put forth the resolutions, or if we do, is there some type of guardrail we put around in the event that the board is unable to meet?
So Ms. Sneary, I think that's a really good question. I think one thing that I noticed is that I believe it's under the designation of the superintendent. It may be in both of them. The approval of payment of bills between board meetings does have an end date, correct, of the next reorganization, which is traditionally in June. Is that correct? So this, the end of May.
Yes.
So going off of, before I turn it over to everybody else, going off of what Mrs. Neary has said, is this sort of like an emergency provision in the event that we are unable to meet?
So it can be used in emergencies. Typically, this is something that you will find, for example, my previous district had this as a standing item on their agenda. And it just gives us some flexibility. There are times where we need to pay bills because of a deadline. For instance, the health benefits bill, which is a very large bill, is due, or utilities are due, or pay apps for contractors come in a time that's not congruent with board meeting schedules. So we do occasionally have to do that to begin with. And obviously transfers are something that we need flexibility with, because I think I've given the example of, we don't want to say to, the placement of a child in a special ed situation where, an out of district situation where we have to wait for a transfer to be made to sort of place the child. So we do sometimes need flexibility with that as well. When we, knew we were moving into sort of this unknown territory here, we thought that this gives us flexibility from a standpoint of, we have people working from home, we are trying to process bills in a more, doing the best we can, I guess I should say, with emailing things and just needing some flexibility. Anything that we pay winds up on the next bill list for the board to approve. So there is nothing that ever gets paid that doesn't eventually get in front of the board. But we just felt that, not knowing what we were up against in the next couple of months, that we needed some flexibility in these areas to move forward and keep things operational and moving.
So again, before I ask the next person that question, just from my understanding, it's a best practice that you have seen in other districts that have this as standard regular language, and you just took this opportunity of everything that was going on to sort of bring it to the forefront.
Yes, and to be honest, I was kind of surprised that we didn't have something like that in place here, but felt that given the situation that it would be necessary to do that.
Okay. Okay, so Ms. Friedel.
Well, I'm just a little confused as to the explanation that was just given. The bills are the bills. We meet bi-weekly regularly, except for when there's a committee of the whole, like in April, and the bills seem to get paid. So I'm just not sure why we need this provision.
I mean, it's the same response, honestly, that as Lynn just went through, that what we're facing and what we're dealing with, we never thought that we'd be teaching remotely 11,000 kids, for 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or what the reality of the situation is. Our responsibility in terms of running the district and keeping things moving forward is what the responsibility administratively that we have. It's ideally there won't be any issues, then our meetings will go off as they should on the 14th of April and on the 28th of April. The budget will go through as it should. We'll get the things we're supposed to get from the township. All that stuff will work. But if they don't, this provides that opportunity for us. Anything that would happen still has to be reported out to the board. The board still has to take action on it. It's just that we can do it before the board takes action. That's managing in a crisis, I guess, is the best way to look at it, and to be prepared to manage in that crisis. One of our benefits when we did close school, made the announcement on the 13th, is that we had an implementable plan that was in place so that we were up and going, 3 days after we made the announcement, as opposed to some other places that, are just kind of getting up and going in the last week and the beginning of this week. Preparation.
Ms. Friedel, do you have follow-up?
One last question. So can this provision be a scope so that it would not include such things as like building, transferring money to do construction work, and only be related to things like the bills and the payroll?
Typically, any kind of transfer that we would need to make for that type of construction, like, and we've done it in the past when we need to move funds around in the capital reserve account, that absolutely has to be board approved. We can't just do that without any board approval. So this would just be within the general fund, moving funds, again, for the daily operations. This wouldn't have anything to do with major projects or capital reserve or anything like that.
So
Thank you, Ms. Sugars. That was very helpful.
Okay.
That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Avadia?
Hi. Yeah, I just had two questions. Well, I guess we've covered the first one enough. But my question for donations is, with something like the sound system that's there, obviously, you know, that's something that's transportable. But is there an expectation, like with the water fountain or with the pollinator garden, that there's a certain time that we would keep those? I'm just thinking about, because, you know, we may be, you know, doing some major work. We may need some flexibility within the schools. And I'm just thinking, like, when we approve something like a pollinator garden, is there some expectation that we'll keep it for 5 years, 10 years, or something of that nature?
That's one of the chef's.
Yeah, Mr. Avani, good question. I don't believe that we have a provision typically, and when we accept any donations, that there's an amount of time that it will be usable, or, you know, that it will be in that spot. It's an interesting question. We can certainly follow up with the folks from Beck about the garden, and they've done different types of gardens, you know, in the past over at Beck. You know, the water fountain over at Stockton is going to be a mounted water fountain. You know, should there be done, you know, and it's got the bottle filling, it's a you know, there's electric that goes along with it and that kind of thing. So that's going to be pretty much you know, something that will be in place. And you're right, the sound system, you know, the money to be invested in the sound system at Carusi, you know, should there be the opportunity through referendum or through other project monies, you know, to do work in the gym at Carusi, that sound system would have to be taken down and moved and then reinstalled. So good question, but no, I don't believe that we have a time expectation for them.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
No questions or comments, thanks.
Mrs. Arroyo?
Yeah, I have a question on 13.5, the approval of the Cherry Hill Campus Police Department standing orders. Could you just talk about that a little bit and what that is?
Sure. So there are 3 standing orders that are listed on the board agenda. They're listed under B and F because that's where the campus police fall in the work that we've done through the years. Cherry Hill is unique in having our own campus police force. It's been in existence for nearly 40 years, since the early 1980s. We believe that we are the only school district in the state, pre-K-12 school district in the state that has its own armed police force. These 3 standing orders are required by the prosecutor's office to be identified. They are not board policies. They are standing orders that are handed down through the prosecutor. One deals with substance abuse, one deals with internal affairs, and one deals with the early warning system within the department that exists. None of these require the addition or additional staff that are here. They all address the 9 sworn officers that are in our campus police department. We do not create the language for these. Like I say, these are all things that are required through coming through the prosecutor's office and through the attorney general that we must have, that any police department must have. And because we have a police department, we have to have them here. They must be approved once a year.
Any follow-ups, Mrs. Arroyo?
Yeah, I just don't remember ever speaking of this coming up in any of the previous meetings. And also if this is covered, in some sense, it is I believe it's a policy, you know, and I think it's the it's 3 important policies that perhaps should be discussed throughout the year so that we're all aware of what the roles and responsibilities are, especially since Cherry Hill has its own police department within the school district, because it still operates under the budget that the school district has. Right? Is that right to say?
I missed the end of what you said, Mrs. Arroyo.
The fact that it's under the school budget, that we fund the Cherry Hill Police, the school district police department, I think it should be something that we talk about a little bit more, especially these 3 standing orders. And while they seem to be renewals on things that we need to have implemented as the police department, I just would like a little bit more conversation throughout the year on their role and what they provide us and the support that's needed in order to keep them sustained, especially with these 3 standing orders that stem from the AG's office to our local prosecutors.
So, Mr. Roy, if I'm hearing you correctly, just to sort of paraphrase, we could have done a better job in educating maybe some of our newer board members on some of these routine standing orders that some of us that have been around a little longer are familiar with, but our folks newer to the board, we should be having these conversations so that they have this information ahead of time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin?
Yeah, I just wanted to just comment on I think it's a smart idea to have the contingency plan put in place that we talked for items 1 and 2, especially given the fact that we just don't know what might happen. Right now we're relying on technology as far as the internet and people having internet and all that at their home. We don't, God forbid, but something could happen where it might be out for a period of time or whatever. So even though we are having a board meeting over the internet and over the phone, there still things could come up. So I think it is wise to have a contingency plan, and it seems like it's not so broad that it would totally remove all kind of restraints. But it is. I like the idea of having a contingency plan.
Thank you. Mrs. Schultz?
I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Sugars for voting.
I'm going to open the online voting, and then I will go through the list if there's any abstentions or changes. Give that a minute. Any abstentions? Mrs. Arroyo?
No.
Any abstentions? Ms. Friedel?
No.
Mr. Goodwin?
No.
Mrs. Matlack?
None, thank you.
Any abstentions? Mrs. Neary?
None, thank you.
Mr. Abadia?
None, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
I need to abstain with respect to Beata Home Health on the bill list. Yes to the rest.
Mrs. Tong, any abstentions?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Seidel?
No, thank you. Okay, we'll move into our human resources section of the action agenda. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, leaves of absence certificated. Number 6, leaves of absence non-certificated. Number 7, assignment salary change certificated. Number 8, assignment salary change non-certificated. And number 9, other compensation certificated. Mrs. Tong, do I have a second?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Royo, any questions?
No.
Mrs. Matlack?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Neary?
No questions.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions.
Mr. Goodwin?
No questions.
Ms. Friedel?
No questions.
Mr. Avadia?
No questions.
And Mrs. Tom?
No questions.
Okay. Mrs. Sugars?
Okay, we'll open the online voting. Do we have any abstentions? I'll start with Mrs. Arroyo.
No.
Ms. Friedel?
I don't have any abstentions, but I got an error message when I voted, but I voted yes to all.
All right, I'm going to change your vote to yes. Mr. Goodwin, any abstentions?
No, no extensions for me.
Mrs. Matlack?
None, thank you.
Mrs. Neary?
None, thank you.
Mr. Avadia?
None, thanks.
Mrs. Schultz?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Tong?
Nope. Thank you.
Mrs. Seidel?
None, thank you.
Okay, we have a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Next, we'll move into policy and legislation. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying investigation decisions. Number 2, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying hearing decisions. Mrs. Neary, do I have a second?
Yes, I second the motion.
Thank you. Mrs. Matlack, any questions?
None, thanks.
Mr. Avadia?
No questions.
Mrs. Arroyo?
No questions.
Mrs. Tong?
Nope. Thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
No questions.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions. Thank you.
And Mrs. Neary?
No questions.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Sugars?
Going to open the online voting. Any abstentions or changes, Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
No, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
None, thanks.
Mrs. Neary?
No, thank you.
Mr. Avadia?
None, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Tong?
Nope. Thank you.
Mrs. Seidel?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We don't have any items to move tonight for strategic planning, but as we've discussed in the past, we're going to use this time to talk about our strategic plan and updates for all of the items that we have been working on in strategic planning. So turn it over to Dr. Melosh for an update first, and then we can have any discussion at this point.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So our 3 committees that are working on our overarching umbrella goals that we've talked about a number of times, they are continuing to meet virtually. We are still expecting them to be able to provide the recommendations and the action plan for each of those goals. Remember, student wellness, connecting beyond the classrooms, which we certainly have been doing quite a bit of over the last 2+ weeks. But we will see those action plans. We will still expect those to be on schedule to be presented to the board late in May early in June. So I have heard, in fact, I think on Thursday of this week, I'll be participating in a virtual meeting with one of the groups just to kind of talk a bit more, a review about what the background was and what they've been doing. Nothing, I don't believe anything has happened over the course of the last 2 weeks. Our instructional staff has been a little preoccupied, so they set the meeting up for this week and are just kind of getting into where they are. Mrs. Sugars and I, over the course of the next couple of weeks, will talk about what we're going to do with our Safety and Security Committee and our Alternative Funding Committee. We still expect to have one more meeting, and most likely that will end up being a virtual meeting, probably similar to what we're doing right now with the board. We'll set it up through Teams or something similar. Mrs. Sugars and I will talk about that over the next week or so, because both of those meetings are scheduled to take place during the second to the last week in April. You sit on part of that, Mrs. Neary, Mrs. Schultz involved as well. So I look forward to those discussions. I am kind of excited to see the final report out that comes from each of those committees, and we will still expect a presentation to the board late in May. I guess I'm thinking at the action meeting, when ideally, hopefully we'll be back together and it'll be on a more traditional schedule. But that's kind of where we are right now. It's kind of where we are right now.
Okay. One question about is there a possibility that the dates will change for safety and security and alternative funding? If so, I'd like to give the attendees as much notice as possible.
Yeah, good question. So I would say probably not. My guess is because everybody's had it on their calendar. Mrs. Sugars put the dates out when we talked about it back in the fall when we initially announced the meetings. So we would really like to kind of stick with those. I just think, in deference to everybody's time and their commitment to being involved in it, it's going to be more of a setting it up and practicing ahead of time. But I would expect that we would stay, the same thing. Mrs. Sugars and I may be sitting in here, as we're doing right now, with a structure like this, and then everybody else kind of jump on as well.
So just to sort of kick off the conversation, I know in our previous strategic planning meetings and as a board, we were anxiously awaiting Dr. Gripp's demographic study, which we hoped would give us some facts and some guidance to start to have some of those deeper conversations about what our district looks like in the future.
Yes.
Since, obviously under strategic planning, we want to work on that long-term strategic plan as well as all of these committees as well as the future bond referendum, right?
Yes.
There's all these parallel paths happening at the same time.
It's starting to converge.
So on the calendar that we all got when we first started down this path, we were going to start having some of those conversations at this point in time once
Correct.
we had a demographic study. So
Yes.
There's certainly not easy conversations to have.
Right.
So I think that's would like to sort of open it up to just sort of start down
Yes.
that path and then see if administration has thought at all about this, and if you have any preliminary recommendations or paths that you are looking to explore.
Right.
But I would, with that, I'm going to turn it over to the board members and see if they have anything they'd like to bring up on this topic. So I will start with Mr. Avadia. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, just a couple sort of macro comments. From Dr. Gripp's presentation, what I understood was that, we're expecting, let's say in the next 5 years, some kind of swell of population. It was unclear to me exactly what that meant from a building and facilities perspective, whether if we re-neighborhooded a little bit the schools so that they swung a little bit to west, if we could get every seat covered, even in sort of the most aggressive projection of population growth, or whether it would leave us in a place where we were looking at something like, I don't know what you call them, but like where you have trailers. Well, yeah, I guess you call them trailers outside of a school to allow for for increased population. So at the elementary school, that was kind of my biggest takeaway, is that we should at least be prepared for either some kind of adjustment in who exactly goes to school where, within certain geography, or something like trailers in the next 5 years. Because I'm imagining with his projection that there's a plus minus. And so if it's even more than he's anticipating, on the middle school and high school level, as I understood it, there isn't that same concern. And I believe Barclay only takes a certain amount that it can hold, so that there it wouldn't be a concern. With something like, things I'd like to see the board look at. I mean, I really don't have a recommendation here, just something to get perhaps public input and perhaps district advice on would be, what would it look like at the middle school level to have potentially 3 neighborhood schools, or is there what binds us to kind of that east-west lottery, and where do we see that going in the next 5 to 10 years? I don't mean lottery, I mean school choice. So just some systemic things. It's not that I think more or different or new construction or reconfiguration or any of that is better, but it's just things I think we should take a look at in this process, because overall sense of it is once we have a plan, we won't be revisiting that plan for about 20 years. So things that I just think, we would want to look at some feasibility studies, look at some data in terms of what we really think is going to happen, and how do we deliver education, obviously with an eye toward, evening out, let's say, class sizes and achievement, but also, in terms of, what are there savings in the system that could be there if not for some of these structural pieces. So I think it's a long-term conversation, but these are the types of things I'd like to see discussed as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Cavadia. I would agree that they're all conversations that need to be had, and they are long-term. They are going to take a while to have those conversations. I also just want to echo some of the things that you mentioned were items that have come up in all of our surveys, in our ad hoc committee, in our secondary committees that we had. I think that there's a lot of people that feel that it's time to have those conversations. So I just wanted to, refresh everybody that we did receive a lot of feedback from the public on having those difficult conversations and the necessity of having those conversations. So, Ms. Arroyo.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the presentation that gentleman, I forget his name. He was going by the fact that we were previously a half-day kinder program. Does that mean that his information is going to be updated moving forward, or is there going to be like amendment to his research considering it's we moved to full day?
No, because it's still the same number of kids. He was looking at births as he moved forward.
Because he mentioned he mentioned it after that it would have been helpful to know that. I'm not sure if that changes things. So at least a follow up or something to see if it.
And again, we can ask administration to follow up, but I took his comment to be related to the increase in students coming in kindergarten. That's what I think, that's at least what I thought that he meant, that there was an influx in kindergarten because of the move to full day this year, because people who were traditionally sending their kids out elsewhere sent them to our kindergartens. That's the way that I interpret it, but we can certainly find out what he meant by that. We can follow up with him. As we looked at the transition for this school year, the largest increase in any of the schools that we saw when we went from the half-day program to the full-day program was at Russell Knight. And we honestly don't believe, looking at the enrollment there, that it was because we went from a half-day program to a full-day program. The biggest reason is there's a lot of children of that age that live in the Barclay neighborhood. There have been a lot of homes that have turned over, and this is where employing Dr. Grip, with his background to look at births, to look at home sales, to look at all that kind of stuff really kind of feeds in. And some of the schools where we traditionally saw a larger increase from kindergarten enrollment to first grade enrollment, Woodcrest, at Bret Hart, which were two of the biggest ones in the past, we did not see the dramatic increase in the enrollment in kindergarten
for the first year. So we can certainly follow up and ask him that question again and go from there.
Any follow-ups, Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mrs.
Hey,
Tom.
Lisa.
Oh, Stravadia, go ahead.
Well, this is a very good one. I just
hi, Eric.
wanted to point out that when he had mentioned that, actually that was in response because I had asked him if it was possible that the bump was due to full day kindergarten. That's when he mentioned it during the presentation.
Oh, thank you for
Because
clarifying.
he said he hadn't known about it. He said he hadn't known about it until then. So.
Thank you. While you're talking, do you have any other questions or comments?
I guess the one thing that I'm curious about, and maybe, if this isn't the right time, I'm just curious in terms of the timeline that we had. I know that we kind of had a timeline, and I know with the whole advent of us going to online school or whatever you want to call it, is there going to be an impact on that timeline, or do we anticipate an impact on the timeline we had in terms of getting through all of the items for strategic planning and planning out the next referendum, et cetera?
Yeah, Eric, I think honestly, there's going to absolutely be an impact because of what we're dealing with right now. We're not prepared, I don't think, tonight to be able to say what the full impact is going to be. Some of that is going to be dependent upon, how long we are living, in this state of the compassionate spacing and a lot of business being shut down and schools being shut down. So we don't have a good answer other than, yes, our timeline for sure is going to be impacted.
And I guess just a follow-up, and I don't know if this is even possible, but if we're set to stay closed longer, is there any work that we could possibly get done with people, keeping their distances, obviously, but is there work that could be possibly done in the schools if we're told that we have to stay, remote longer?
So, and I'm going to let Mr. Sugars talk about it. There's some work that's being done right now because construction is one of the industries that may continue. So there's work going on at the vestibule at High School West and the vestibule at High School East. There's work that is scheduled to be done over spring break. There's abatement work that's scheduled to be done in one of the buildings. The hard part with getting more work done is doing bids and going through that process. All of that would have to take place in order to get contractors in to do the work. I will tell you honestly, and Mr. Sugars can give you more information, I don't believe it's possible to do that, to go through a full process, or to find contractors that are able and willing to do that right now.
We're also in a little bit of a limbo right here because we're ending one budget year and we are just starting the first couple steps of getting next year's budget approved. So, funding for projects that we were planning to do next year isn't technically available to us yet, and not something that we, can take advantage of. We are finishing up our vestibule projects. We have started the wall project at East, and we will continue to work. We have received some notification from some of our contractors about staffing and the ability to get supplies. We are at this point concerned about being able to get supplies to continue to do some of these projects. But for instance, we've had, our security camera people in working on the Alyssa's law compliance that we need to work on, and some of those things that, we knew given this time frame we would try to do and get it done while we had the opportunity.
Thank you. Mrs. Tom?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Friedel?
I don't know that I have anything new to add, but I do completely agree with the comments that Ben made. And I'm going to just say that I kind of walked out after the meeting, after the statistical report was given, with the same thoughts as Rosie. Based on his reaction, I was just wondering, if knowing the full day was going to impact anything. So I appreciate you following up to make sure we didn't miss something.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz?
Hi, I would agree. A lot of my questions were what Ben talked about already. The only other thing I would add is I know that in the presentation it was kind of covered that I think there was approximately, was it 2,000 units that were proposed? So I would be curious, and then out of that 2,000 units that were proposed, it was commented to pay attention to the units, because even though it was 2,000 that were proposed, that it didn't necessarily, I think we were looking at, was it a total of something like 58 that would actually, some number, it wasn't necessarily 2,000 families. So I would be curious to know when those proposed units, if they actually come to fruition, how many of those that come to fruition are actually going to be multifamily that might impact those numbers as well when we start to have these discussions of, I guess, where do we kind of shift students amongst our schools? Because I think if I go back to my notes and look at that conversation, we were talking on kind of proposed units and whether they were single or multifamily or just single units. So I guess that's more of my comments.
Thank you. Mrs. Matlack?
I don't think I have anything new to add. I just would like to reiterate that I do think this is a long-term conversation. You know, as specific as the demographic report was, you know, things do change, and we can, you know, keep up with those changes as they happen by keeping it in the conversation in the forefront and asking the questions of the township and, you know, other sources to see if, you know, what has been projected for us over the next few years, you know, if those things are in fact actually happening as we go through our conversations and talk about our different options and different, you know, scenarios for, you know, how we take care of, you know, and deal with an influx of children in maybe one neighborhood that affects a certain school. So I would just like to reiterate that this is and should be a long-term, ongoing long-term conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. And Mrs. Neary?
Yeah, so to echo a bit, yeah, Carol's 100% right. It is a long-term conversation that's going to change over time. I do think some of what he's noted is kind of held true over time as far as the shift in the location of the population. And to me, it seemed evident, obviously, of a need of the buildings, but where that need is and how to best utilize those buildings. But something to really think about that was a big takeaway that we're kind of not thinking about because we're in the heat of the moment in the current crisis, but working in the finance industry. The impact in the financial crisis of 2008 had a big impact upon birth and where people chose to live and move to. And we're kind of in uncharted waters within that way somewhat right now in what the outcome and the long-term effects of this pandemic may ultimately be, whether it drives people out of the cities and back to the suburbs, or if it doesn't at all, or if now people withhold because of financial situations, you know, having those children that he foresees in that. So I think it is something that's really fluid that we are going to have to be mindful of as we talk about it and what it really may look like. And it could change the demographics regarding our free and reduced lunch. I fear some of those numbers may have been a little suppressed because he was looking at the socioeconomics from that lens. And looking at it from that lens, I don't know that we were truly capturing the full extent of those numbers. And that could change as a result of the situation. So I do want to be mindful, because that was before these uncharted waters that we're in right now. But I just think it is something we're going to have to talk about each time, because I think it is going to change.
Yep, I think that's a really good point. So I certainly don't want to put you on the spot, but has administration had a chance to think about how you'd like to move forward with the conversations? And sort of talked about discussions that we should have at all three levels. Elementary school, more about where do the kids go, middle school, as do we utilize that third school, and then at the high school level in terms of the school choice. Have you given any administration had any preliminary discussions on that yet, or?
Yes, yeah, so absolutely, and I agree with everybody, it's a long-term discussion. I appreciate the board members, their thoughtful comments, in the reflection that they did after Dr. Gripp's presentation. And there are a couple of different pieces, right? So there's a short piece in time that we look at, what did he capture and what does that mean? There's a level of immediacy that we want to look at in terms of what does it look like in our schools. Do we have enough schools operationally? Is 19 the right number? I think that's part of the discussion, to go through. With his projection of a relatively flat enrollment as a district, which included an increase at the secondary level, a decrease at the secondary level and an increase at the elementary level, I think that, looking at the numbers of schools, and the number of seats that we have filled versus the number of empty seats that exist each year going into the schools, that we are probably in a good place with how we are currently organized. Where do children attend school? I agree. I think that's a huge question to ask. I think one of the most fascinating pieces for people, when he did his presentation, were the multicolored maps that he showed of the township. The sending neighborhoods, who went to which schools, to look at the schools, and then to look at the free and reduced meals, the overlay of the socioeconomic impact and where that is. And I would agree with the comments that folks made about an increase. We're seeing an increase already in free and reduced meals. People have been applying during the course of the last 2.5 weeks. And we would encourage anybody, if there are folks that are watching, or if you know people whose situation has changed from last week to this week, please tell them to go online and to refill out the application. There's an immediacy with approval, and we will start providing meals that next time when we are doing the meals. But please make sure that folks are aware. We continue to push that out. We continue to share that in the information that we share with parents. We've emailed it out to all of the families, that kind of stuff. But I do agree that that's going to continue to have an impact. The projection on the number of births, and I wholeheartedly agree with Lori. Looking at what the financial impact is that we're facing right now, what will the short term 6 months versus a longer term of a year or 2 years or 5 years be on our community, I think is a great question. Mrs. Schultz talked about the proposed buildings, that are supposed to go up in town. There's always a huge difference between what's proposed and then what actually gets built, both in the actual numbers and the original numbers from the types of units. And I think it was very timely with what he talked about, when we have to look at the difference between a 1-bedroom apartment or a 2-bedroom apartment, or a 3,000 square foot home, or a 3-bedroom apartment or a 4-bedroom townhome, in terms of the number of children, that are going to end up living in places like that. So there are some unknowns, and the projections that he has are the projections that he has. In terms of the discussion, I do believe this needs to transition into, strategic planning, as we are, as the strategic planning committee of the board, is finishing up the work and their goal this year, that 4th goal. I think that this needs to then transition directly into that 5th goal, or I'm sorry, into the 4th goal again next year, about what are we doing practically. Does that mean we are building a referendum for the 2020-2021 academic year? And I think that's a huge discussion right now, because as I think Mr. Governor, somebody asked, is that going to impact our timelines? And this absolutely, our experience just in the last 2.5 weeks has impacted our timelines. Continuing to be out through the month of April will impact our timelines. Being out longer than that will impact our timelines. So I think there's a dramatic piece that includes, the formation of a board goal and then the adoption for the strategic planning committee to lead the discussion during 2020 and 2021. There are pieces then that will filter out into the other subcommittees, into P&L, into HR, into C&I. that directly have an influence on the direction that we're going as the district. I'm incredibly thankful that the work that we've done, the foresight that the board had, in adopting the goals that we had this year and agreeing to move forward with the strategic planning process, bringing in Judy Wilson, bringing in Mrs. Wilson, to help facilitate and to lead that. Because again, those overarching goals that we have identified and that we have defined are the umbrella that's going to continue to guide us as each one of these discussions take place. I do think there's a lot of questions that we will answer during the course of the next year. And I still think when we sit here a year from now, there's going to be questions that will grow out of that. Some of that depends upon when does a referendum occur. Because remember, a referendum has to occur in our community. A referendum has to occur for our school district. The question that we have right now, and I think that the board, that we'll kind of push administratively, push the board on in the discussion is, what does that look like? Is that during 2020-21? And if so, when? And if not, why not? And then when? But I think that's a real discussion. The rest of it, I think, will continue to go. But I do think the board goals are where those will manifest themselves.
Does anyone have any follow-up to that? Okay. More to come on that discussion then in strategic planning in the future. Okay, next we'll move into our second public comment, which can be on any topic, and Mrs. Sugars will read into the record the comments that she has received. You still have a few minutes to submit any comments to lsugars@chclc.org.
So I'm going to start. Some of these are comments that we received in anticipation of the March 24th board meeting that obviously we did not have an opportunity to cover. So let me start. Okay, I'm going to start with a message that we received from Dr. Ponowitz. Scroll down here. Okay, so I'm going to read his comments. Go to our school district website. Please read Sharon Giaccio's presentation to a committee given in March 2006 or 2007. It outlines cuts to our direct state aid to education starting in 1989-1990. The cut was $5.3 million. As reported in the New York Times, Camden County school districts as a whole gained millions, but our district lost. This would be the first year we may receive more direct state aid than we did 30 years ago. New Jersey Education Aid blog has figures up for our post SFRA aid for 2021. It was reported in the press that we gained the 30th most amount of aid, but if you go to NJ Education Aid, he's a well-known school funding blogger, you will see that the increase in our aid per pupil was the 133rd highest. He then posted numbers for capped aid, uncapped aid, the basic SFRA formula says we should receive. When you look at those calculations, we are approximately 470 highest of all districts in our state. Please focus on what I wrote below. If you want to learn more about SFRA, read New Jersey Education Aid. You could also go to New Jersey Spotlight and read older posts about school funding in New Jersey and court cases involved with SFRA. So that was Dr. Collins's comments. And we have a comment from Mr. Gary Levenbach. Mr. Levenbach lives on College Lane. And his comment is, Dear Cherry Hill Board of Education, I thank you for your service and dedication to the best interests of our students, teachers, and staff of the Cherry Hill Public Schools during this difficult and unprecedented time. I am commenting today with an ask of the Board of Education as you collaborate with state and county officials on when or whether to reopen schools. To the extent that the decision to reopen schools is a local decision and not directed by officials at the state or county level, please take your time before making decisions about school closures several weeks or months in the future. I have read reports about how other states and local districts are closing schools for the remainder of the school year. While I recognize that such a decision may very well be necessary here at some point, I ask that you not rush to such a significant decision. Extending the current closure 1 or 2 weeks at a time while allowing time to see if social distancing and our clinical trials for treating COVID-19 are effective reflects both the seriousness and fluidity of the current environment while allowing for flexibility for our children to continue their education if conditions improve. Okay. Then we received a comment. Don't have an address, but the person's name is Karina Dima, I believe. Dima, W-E-I-D-M-A. And her comment is she is upset that Cherry East supports 8 principals and vice principals at high salary and benefits and feel that property tax increases should be suspended. So that is her comment. Next comment is from Yaris. Yaris family would like to express their sincere appreciation to the administration, BOE, and especially the teachers for all of their efforts in working towards a successful launch of our children's continuity of learning. The emphasis placed on technology access and feeding children truly demonstrated the district's core values. It has not been easy. He also added, I've also known that CHPS was a special place, but this past week has truly proven it to be true. When you take away the buildings, the love and passion of our educators still remains. Okay, so that is the extent of our comments submitted for our last board meeting. And then submitted today, I have another comment from Yanni Harris, double checking about the reorg meeting. My impression was with a November election, our reorg meeting is now in January, not May and June. I think the 2 resolutions are great supports with the current situation. That is the extent of the public comment that I have received.
Thank you. Dr. Malashai, anything to address any of those comments?
I do. So Mr. Chair, we do reorganization votes in January and in?
So we do sort of the board reorg in January after the new board members are brought in, and we do some of our appointments at that point. And then at the end of May, we tend to do kind of a business office reorg, for lack of a better description, where we appoint various positions within the district, and we reappoint all of our professionals, and do, some of those type of things that really are preparing us for going into the next school year.
For the new budget.
Yes.
Great. So late in May and early in January are the 2 times that we do reorganization. Thank you for the positive words. I will tell you, Dr. Perry would love to have 8 principals and vice principals at High School East. At High School East, there is a principal, Dr. Perry, and there are 5 assistant principals. It's the same allotment of administrators at High School East as it is at High School West, 1 principal and 5 assistant principals. The decision about closing schools and schools remaining closed. So when we made the decision to close, made that announcement on March the 13th, that was a local decision that was made. Schools remaining closed right now, that's been taken out of our hands. Right now, that's a decision that is at the state level. It's, there's been, the governor has been verbose, very visible during this crisis, and has talked a lot, and talked a lot about schools, which is incredibly important. And we will wait for additional guidance. We certainly at this point are not allowed to reopen without that approval. When the reopen actually takes place, I do believe that there's a local decision that will be able to be made, but I'm sure that we will receive quite a bit of information over the course of the next month while we remain closed. And I agree, Dr. Potts will continue to follow up with the state funding with where we are. It's great information and great resources that you shared that people can read additionally about what's going on with state funding in the state of New Jersey. And then this is Seidel, if I could just add again, if folks' financial situation has changed, you can apply for free and reduced meals. That application is online. It's always online. If you have any problems, let the building principal know. You can always reach out to me. We will help to guide folks through that process. For folks who do qualify tomorrow, Wednesday, April the 1st, we will be distributing 3 breakfasts and 3 lunches. And again, the sites from 10 to 12 are at High School East, High School West, and Barton Elementary School. From 10 to 10:45 at the park on Victor Ave over in Barlow, in the Barlow section of town, just off of Church Road and Haddonfield Road. And then from 11 to 11:45 over at Carusi Middle School in the Knollwood neighborhood. Meals are there. Just need student's name and ID number when you come to pick them up. We have our Aramark folks who have been wonderful through this process. One of our campus police officers is there as well. It's been great to see the campus police officers interact with the families and the children that they know when they arrive. Next week during spring break, we will still be doing 1 day of meals, and that, Ms. Sugars, is going to be on Monday, right?
That will be on Monday.
On Monday. So on April the 6th, we will share all this information. We will push out again, and we'll do the direct emails, and we'll do phone calls to families who qualify to let them know what the pickup will be during the week of spring break. Again, thank you to everyone. Thank you to the families. Thank you especially to our staff for the work that they've been doing. If you have questions, concerns, if you have issues, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. For those of you who have seniors in high school, members of the class of 2020, there'll be a letter coming home from me this week. We are continuing to look at those very special things that are planned in the lives of our seniors and the family members of the seniors. As we have more information, we'll continue to share that. Check your mailboxes. The information there will be some information that'll be out late this week.
Thank you. And Dr. Malash, our committee meetings will be held in this format as well?
So yes, good question. So our next committee meetings are in May. They're all scheduled for Monday, May the 4th. April is a committee of the whole meeting that's scheduled for Tuesday, April the 14th. So April 14th and April 28th, those board meetings for sure will be done in this manner because we know that we will be closed at least that long. Again, optimistic that we'll receive additional information that'll take us to May 4th, but certainly within, well a week out that we'll make announcements about what that'll look like. All things being equal, committee meetings will look like this as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
But the committee meetings will not be broadcast.
Okay. Okay, so with that, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, practice compassionate spacing,
Yes.
and have a good evening. Mrs. Neary, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Yes. Sorry,
And-
I was on mute.
That's okay. Mrs. Matlack, would you second?
I second that.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed?
Nope.
Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Stay safe.
Good night.
Stay well.